Hello BookTube, it's Eleanor here, and today is the start of me talking about some of my favourite books of this year. Now, it's a bit controversial to start this before the end of the year because how could you possibly know what your favourite books are going to be? I don't foresee myself reading many more books this year, and there may be 5 stars in there, and perhaps there will be in the next few weeks, but if there are, I will tack them onto next year's. I'm not fussy when these come into my favourites, and I wanted to make sure that I had these videos up before I go on holiday. So today we're going to be talking about the favourite non-fiction books I read this year, and actually non-fiction was one of the categories when I was looking at all the books that I gave 5 stars this year that I had the most books in, and there's 4 books that have cropped up that I feel are probably my top non-fiction of the year. So those are the ones I'm going to talk about now. From families, bees, death, amazing inspirational women. There's so many interesting books here, and I hope that maybe if you haven't read some of these, they might pique your interest to pick them up. The first one I actually haven't got a copy of, or I think I have, but I can't find it. And that is Far From the Tree by Andrew Solomon. Not to be confused by the YA novel, which is also called Far From the Tree. This Far From the Tree is non-fiction. And in this book, Solomon looks at families coping with a number of different things in their lives. Dwarfism, deafness, Down syndrome, autism, schizophrenia. He looks at prodigies and children conceived in rape and transgenderism, and many, many more things. I'd say the main draw of this book was the in-depth and various interviews that Andrew did with a number of different families, really going in depth into what's going on in their lives and the way that they deal with these situations. He really looks at that idea of acceptance and support and how important that is in terms of the well-being of people in your family, and helping your children especially to accept themselves comes from what you teach them. And I just thought it was a really interesting book, and he showed all sorts of different sides. He didn't just show families that were perfect and doing it perfectly, because no one does. He showed a various range of different situations, different people, different backgrounds, and different outcomes, and I really liked that. I think as well what made this really hit home is that at the beginning and the end of the book, Solomon actually looks at his own family life and various things to do with his own life and his own relationship with his family, and I thought that was a really strong way to begin and end the book. So moving on to that, from that, another book which is totally different but just equally as good was Brazen by Penelope Baggio. This is about the rebel ladies who rocked the world, and it is done in graphic form, which I really enjoyed. And these tell the stories of various different women through history who have made a difference. There are definitely some in here that you might have heard of, like Betty Davis, the songwriter, Tove Jansson, who was the creator of Trolls, but there were so many in here that I'd never heard of before, and it was really a joy to find out about them in such a fun and interesting way. And I just, yeah, it was a true joy to read. I really loved picking this up and dipping in and out of the different ladies and finding out what it is they'd done. So I definitely recommend this one. A more recent favourite, and one that you may have seen, there is a review video already up on my channel recently, so I will link that up here, is The Honeybee Heart Has 5 Openings by Helen Jukes. I loved this book. It was interesting. It was talking about Helen's journey into beekeeping. It had snippets of her own life, as well as the beekeeping itself, which is way more complex than I ever gave it credit for. And I found it fascinating. There was natural history in there. We learned more about bees in general and history, and how people have treated bees in history and how they've been kept throughout history. There was excerpts and nods towards different books that Helen had read, which then led me to down the rabbit warren of putting them onto my list to read. And it talks about her and her life and in general, and her exploration into this. It was fascinating. Go and watch the video, the video of my review if you want to know a little bit more. But yes, a full 5 stars from me. And then the final one I want to recommend in this video is Deathacre. Bill Bass and John Jefferson. I was not so surprised that I gave this a 5-star, because I do have a little bit of a morbid fascination, and I went into this knowing exactly what it was about. I'd read Mary Roach's Stiff a while back and loved it, and Mary Roach, I think, writes in a really approachable way, in a very conversational tone. She has quite a humorous style of writing, and she talks about all the different things that happen to dead bodies, and in that book she does mention Bill Bass, and she talks about his body farm, and people like Patricia Cornwell, who writes detective novels, has visited him on this body farm to find out information for some of their books, and this is just how this body farm came about. It talks about Bill's history in anthropology and forensic anthropology in particular. It talks about the cases that he's worked on and things he's been brought in to try and help with, and how he solved those cases, and how having this body farm, and if you don't know what a body farm is, he runs this farm, it's not a farm, he runs this area of land where research is done into the decomposition of bodies in different situations. For example, different types of soil, different temperatures, different types of undergrowth, different types of insects, all sorts of different things. You know, in cars, in sand, and all sorts of experiments are done by his university students, and research papers written, and all of these things can ultimately then help forensic scientists and detectives when they are looking into cases. I found it fascinating. I thought it was really interesting, so I thoroughly enjoyed that, and you get snippets of his life as well, because obviously you're following it in a sort of chronological timeline, so I definitely recommend that one as well. So various different books there, but 4 non-fiction books that have been my favourite of the year. I'm losing my voice here. Come back tomorrow to find out some more books that I have loved this year. Have you read any of these? Are any of these your favourites of the year? Let me know in the comments down below, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now, BookTube.